Welcome to Real Talk Fantasy Baseball. I am Will Power, joined by John Murrow, who is currently on vacation right now, kind of roaming around to different ballparks around the country. How's it going, man? Where are you at today?
So far, so good. I am currently in the lobby of an extended stay suites down right outside Truist Park in Atlanta, Georgia. So we just got here. Can't get in until 3 o'clock. So killing some time here. Going to explore around Atlanta before the 7 o'clock game. It is Ronald Acuna bobblehead night. So I'll be getting one of those.
Nice.
And looking forward to third day of baseball here. So was in Baltimore yesterday for Jackson Holliday's first home run. Almost. I say, honest to God, almost had a chance at catching it. I was deep in right center, or deep in right field, I should say. And we were at the Phillies the night before. They got swept by the Yanks, but so far, so fun. So off to a good start.
All right. And today we're going to be talking about the trade deadline recap and winners and losers from the deadline. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back, everybody. Before we start, please hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll just get right into it, man. Oh, yeah, scan that QR code in the top right corner, right above John's head. And, yeah, it'll take you to all of our social medias. Like, subscribe, follow, all that stuff. All right, so trade deadline. We're going to start back all the way from July 3rd because I feel like that's really when things started to heat up a little bit. So on July 3rd, the Brewers acquired Aaron Savali from the Rays for shortstop Gregory Barrios. Now, Aaron Savali has been kind of up and down his whole career, and the Rays actually did a really good job of developing Aaron Savali into a serviceable pitcher. Never been the top guy, but he's kind of just been in that bunch where it's sometimes he's been a streamer and sometimes you hold on to him for a little bit longer. And he has a pretty good stretch of good starts, quality starts. He always goes deep into games. Well, before he did. And now moving over to Milwaukee, I don't like this trade. I think that the fantasy value of Aaron Savali drops pretty significantly because the Rays are just so good at developing their pitching. And he's going from a really good pitcher's ballpark to a really bad pitcher's ballpark, really good hitter's ballpark. So thoughts, John?
Yeah, Aaron Savali's been pretty mid. I think ever really since he left Cleveland, he hasn't been. I think he set pretty high expectations. Even going to Tampa, and he was a good pitcher. He was never great. I think he showed flashes that he could be great, but he's just been mid. And like you said, the ballpark's not going to help him much out in Milwaukee either. So, a guy that I don't have huge expectations for the rest of the year.
Yeah, same. Aaron Savali was kind of I believe he was a top prospect at one point, and I don't know, he just kind of never really became the it guy, I guess.
Yeah, but I think he could be a 3 or a 4 in a rotation.
Yeah, and there's been a couple seasons where it was you definitely hold on to him in fantasy, and it's not the type of guy that you have wanted to drop at all. But now with this Park downgrade, I think it's just kind of safe to say he's basically a streamer now, and that's even kind of borderline itself because he does give up a lot of fly balls, and a lot of balls go out more than not at the Brewers ballpark versus the Rays ballpark in Tropicana. All right, next we have July 6th. The Red Sox acquire right-handed pitcher Trey Wingenter, something like that, from the Tigers for right-handed pitcher CJ Wines. I don't think this has any fantasy value. So moving on to July 8th, the Reds acquire outfielder Austin Slater and cash from the Giants for left-handed pitcher Alex Young. I think this is more just for depth. Neither of those guys are really very fantasy relevant. So we can just go ahead and skip that one too. July 9th, the Mets acquire right-handed pitcher Phil Maton from the Rays for a player to be named later, or cash. That one doesn't really have much value either. Royals acquire right-handed pitcher Hunter Harvey from the Nationals for infielder Caden Wallace and a draft pick. Now, that actually doesn't have much fantasy value, really, but that draft pick for the Nationals, like we saw the Nationals be great for a season back in 2019 when they won the World Series, and that draft pick compensation, that actually means a lot, man, because diamonds in the rough, they're hard.
Baseball drafts in general are just impossible to predict. I mean, any guy can just have 1 or 2 good years and then fall off a cliff real quick too, and it can go the opposite way as well. So it's more predictable than any other sport, I'd say.
And getting an extra draft pick definitely helps, where you can kind of like it's quantity, but a lot of times you do find some quality in that quantity. Having that extra pick is very nice.
Yeah.
On July 15th, the Twins acquire Rylan Bannon from the Mets for unknown compensation. No real fantasy value there. On July 21st, Giants acquire right-handed pitcher Mike Bauman from the Mariners for cash. No fantasy value there. July 22nd, Brewers acquired left-handed pitcher Tyler J from the Mets for right-handed pitcher TJ Shook. I don't really see much value in there either. July 25th, the Diamondbacks acquired left-handed pitcher AJ Puck from the Marlins for first base, third base, Davison De Los Santos, and Andrew Pintar, not Andrew Painter. So this actually has a little bit of fantasy value because AJ Puck was actually looking pretty decent for the Marlins. Not like crazy type of innings or like a like as good as we've seen him in the past, but pitching in Arizona, more like a winning team versus the Marlins. I think AJ Puck has a lot of opportunities for holds. There's no way he's going to be the closer over there, but it does add a lot of depth.
I'd say there's no way. I mean, Paul Sewald's been a little shaky there's no doubt about that. So he could get some looks here and there too.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, he'll definitely get some opportunities. I think they're going to test him out, put him in low leverage situations, and then see what they'll have him do after that. Now, moving on to July 26th, this is a bigger one. Mariners acquire Randy Arozarena from the Rays for outfielder Aiden Smith, right-handed pitcher Brody Hopkins, and a player to be named later. Now, Randy Arozarena is definitely a top name in fantasy baseball. He's been a top 50 outfielder for a while now. Had a down first half of the season, but he has been starting to come around lately. I'm really surprised that the Rays let him go. I know he's a little bit older. I think he's already like 30 or 31 years old. So they're probably just thinking like, future, and they don't think they really have much hopes for postseason play this season. So it's good to kind of like bolster like their farm system. Randy Arozarena, fantasy value wise, moving from the Rays to the Mariners, the Rays ballpark is not by any means a hitter's ballpark. It's a little bit better for pitchers than it is for hitters, but Randy Arozarena just went to the worst ballpark for hitters. So kiss home runs goodbye. He'll get on base and he'll steal some bases and bring some energy. He'll get you some points and some runs and RBI, but that home run total that we've seen in the past, that was like 25, maybe possibly a little bit more. I think that's going to drop. It's going to be closer to like 20 in Seattle. Thoughts, John?
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of player Randy is. I think his ceiling should be like a 275, 20 to 25 homer guy, and maybe closer to 15 to 20 should be the expectation at this point in his career. 80 RBIs, and I think that's nice to get out of a player like Randy Arozarena, and I think we need to tamper expectations. He's not a high level. You shouldn't compare him to like a Mookie Betts or some of the top outfielders in the game, but he's a nice outfielder and he's a nice piece to have. And I think we haven't seen the best of him for sure this season. I think moving forward, a change of scenery and what could be a very exciting postseason for the Mariners. That atmosphere is no joke. So that's kind of how I view this trade, is that he's going to be an exciting piece for them, and he can get hot at any moment. So, what he hasn't done so far well this year, he can, kind of flip the script when it counts. And that's all that matters.
Yeah, and he's already had some big moments in baseball. He was in the World Series in 2020, and he's had some World Series experience back in 2020 when the Rays faced the Dodgers. And now the Mariners, second place in the division in the AL West. That's going to help the lineup a lot, because he has a pretty strong bat. Like I said, he struggled in the first half, but he was on our like trade targets a few weeks ago, and I was telling him,
your boy,
get Randy Arozarena because he's going to break out anytime. And
dude, 6 for 19 so far with Seattle with 1 home run. So
that's not bad at all, man. I'll take
start.
it. It's much better than what he was doing with the Rays in the first half of the season. So Seattle has a pretty decent lineup, so there should be a lot of opportunities for runs and RBI.
Seattle's lineup's been anemic, though. They needed some kind of spark. I don't know if that's enough, but I think it's something. It's better than what they've been horrific, despite how good their pitching's been.
Mm-hmm. Yep, completely agree. And I
also think on the other side of that too, I think the Rays acquiring Dylan Carlson says a lot. They traded away like a guy like Randy, and I think that talks about their expectations. They're kind of accepting they probably have a shot at a wild card, and that's about it this year. So they're looking at a guy like Dylan Carlson, who they see something in him, and if they can pull that out, this guy's a top prospect too, just last year. So he's got a ton of potential still. If the Rays are trading for him, that's usually a good sign that they can find something and pull something out of a guy like him. So someone to have on your radar too. Maybe not this season, but a guy that's going to flip it around here, I could see in the next couple years. So
yeah, I think the biggest reason why the Mariners went after Randy Arozarena is because Julio Rodriguez just went on the IL. So they needed an extra outfielder, an extra good defensive outfielder out there. And once Julio Rodriguez comes back, then, Arozarena is still going to be bolstering that lineup, and they're just going to be just a little bit better than they have been somewhat recently. All right, so the same day, July 26th, the Red Sox acquire James Paxton from the Dodgers for infielder Moises Bolivar. Now, the Dodgers, they really have a
weird move. Really weird move to me.
Yes, very, very weird, because Paxton was actually doing very well. He had a 4.43 ERA and 18 starts, but he was still serviceable as like a 4th or 5th starter. And he's just depth that the Dodgers could have held on to towards the end of the season. But I think that their thinking was, we're going to get another starting pitcher at the deadline. So, they DFA'd him, which was wild to me. I didn't understand that because he had looked so good in his last 5 starts. But
not just for fantasy value, but even if you just keep a guy like that to eat innings when you need him, why just let him go for nothing?
Yeah, push some starts back sometimes and let Paxton, take like a back end of the rotation type of thing, a 6th starter, or even just use as like a piggyback for a guy for like Kershaw that, like we saw yesterday, that only went, what was it, like 4 innings, something like that. And then you can bring Paxton in and eat up 2 or 3 innings, and before the bullpen can go in there and save some arms for later. But we can talk about the other starting pitcher that the Dodgers got in a little bit. Let's move on. Actually, so let's talk about James Paxton a little bit, because he did have some fantasy value before this trade, mostly as a streamer. But, I had him in a league or two, and I wasn't dropping him. He was doing really good. So why are you going to drop a starting pitcher that is on somewhat of an incline? So the Red Sox acquiring James Paxton. Paxton has pitched in Boston before. I believe that was in 2022 and 2023, I believe. So, it's familiar territory. He's been there before. I feel like James Paxton is still going to have some fantasy value. The Red Sox are not the worst team in the league. They are in third place in the AL East right now. So it's going to be hard for them to get into the postseason, with the Orioles and the Yankees being like the powerhouses in the East, and the Astros and the Mariners being neck and neck in the American League West. But the Mariners and the Red Sox currently both have 57 wins. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. The Red Sox, I guess they needed that extra arm in their rotation. So it does have some value, but the AL East is a very strong division. So having him pitch against a lot of the teams in their division, like the Blue Jays, like the Yankees, and the Rays, I think it's going to be a little harder to justify streaming James Paxton against teams like that versus when he was with the Dodgers, when he was going against guys like teams like Colorado and the Giants that were a little bit easier matchups.
I do think it's going to play a lot to what our conversation of what teams did enough and what teams didn't do enough, when it counts. So, I don't think many teams really did do enough, at least in the fans' view, of what they should and could have done at the deadline stuff. It was a disappointing deadline in general for the baseball fan, I will say.
There was a lot of deals that were probably in the works that just didn't get completed before the deadline, and unfortunately it's a little too late. So a lot of these trades that we see or that we saw, like a lot of these teams are probably thinking like, all right, this is going to lead to this, and then this is going to lead to this, and then we can use these pieces and then do a bigger trade later on. I've seen that multiple times in the past, and that actually didn't happen. I did hear an interview from the Red Sox GM that he was saying that, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of deals that happened that he didn't think were going to happen for the Red Sox themselves. And, he tried to do some other deals, and he thought that, trades were looking pretty good for the Red Sox, and it actually didn't happen because other teams ended up, giving the trading team what they wanted more than what the Red Sox were willing to offer. But that happens to every team. It's like you go in with like a mindset, like we need this guy, and then some other team comes in and just swoops in and takes over. All right. So that was James Paxton. Moving on to the Orioles, same day, July 26th, acquiring Sir Anthony Dominguez and outfielder Christian Pache from the Phillies for outfielder Austin Hayes. I'm going to go ahead and let the Phillies fan take this one.
Yeah, kind of a strange move. And anytime you see two contenders, and especially contenders at the top of their divisions respectively, at least Orioles and Yankees neck and neck, if you will, but to make a trade like this, my first intention was it was a change of scene tradery, or change of scenery trade. Ultimately, it's a trade that kind of doesn't benefit one team or another really that much. But I think Austin Hayes, I'm surprised the Phillies came out and flat out said, hey, we view this guy as a starter. He was an all-star last year, hit 275, so he can do it. Now, I think there's a difference between calling this guy a consistent all-star versus saying this guy was, I don't want to say a pity all-star, just because he had decent numbers and he was just available. And that's not the best way to talk about my new player on the Phillies, but it is what it is. I mean, I think it's a guy right now who fills a need for right-hand bat in a lineup that's very left-hand heavy. And, they need someone who can hit left-handed pitching and be a platoon. But that's kind of how I saw it, at least. But they're saying that he's going to be a starter, and they're going to give this guy a shot until he proves that he isn't the guy. And I'm not surprised they didn't make a bigger move in general for a bat. I am a little surprised they didn't upgrade bullpen a little bit more. I think Carlos Estevez is still a nice move, but I think you still are giving away a guy like Sir Anthony Dominguez, who was disappointing, has never really filled into the role Philadelphia fans saw him growing into, which was, I thought this guy was going to be Mariano Rivera for when he first came up. And maybe that's on me for setting the bar too high, but I think the Phillies saw a opportunity to get a guy with high potential, and that's what they saw in Brandon Marsh. And Brandon Marsh has been good, and I think Austin Hayes can be, same thing. He can be a good player for Philadelphia. Is he the long-term answer in the outfield? Probably not, but he fills a hole right now without giving up a prospect. And I think that's where Sir Anthony still, I think the Baltimore Orioles see it from that perspective too, where, maybe they see something in Sir Anthony that they can pull out and make this guy and reach the potential he was supposed to when he came up.
Yeah, and along with Christian Pache, who was a former top prospect in the Braves organization,
He's a lost cause.
He's struggled a lot this season, hitting 202 in 118 plate appearances. But the Phillies, I think they filled a considerable need with Austin Hayes, an outfielder who can hit left-handed pitching, kind of like what you said. So Hayes has a slash line of 328, 394, and 500 against lefties so far this season. He's only hitting 255 with 3 homers and a 711 OPS against righties. But, I mean, that's fine. I feel like that's a pretty decent trade-off. 255 is not terrible, especially comparing it to Pache that had a 202 batting average against both righties and lefties. So I think 255 against righties is decent, and the 328 and 500 slug against lefties, that's money right there. As we've seen, he's already hit a few home runs with the Phillies organization. So I think that was a good trade.
And if the Phillies can pull out what he did last year, 275, 16 home runs, 5 stolen bases, and a 769 OPS, I mean, that's a really good option to have in your outfield. And I think they're still a couple of years away from some of their prospects coming up, like a Justin Crawford. And I'm never going to close the door on a Juan Soto or other free agent, some kind of big splash in the meantime. But maybe Mike Trout, just throwing that out there if he's ever healthy again in the offseason. But had to say it.
Yeah, I don't know about that one, man. I think everyone's kind of like given up on Mike Trout so far, except maybe some Phillies fans that are just homers and want to see the hometown boy come back and play on the team he rooted for as a kid. That's always fun.
If the Angels come to their senses and say, hey, look, if there's a team that's willing to take on half of this contract, okay, we overpaid. If we can all just move on, and the Phillies would take on half of that contract, that's still a big chunk, by the way.
Yeah, true story. All right, so same day, Mariners acquire right-handed pitcher Yimi Garcia from the Blue Jays for outfielder Jonathan Clase and catcher Jacob Sharp. Now, Garcia has been lights out, man, in the back of the bullpen for Toronto, and it's a strong addition to the Mariners. I like that. I really like this trade for the Mariners because every team needs more pitching, whether it's bullpen or starting pitching help. I don't feel like there's any team out there that couldn't use an extra arm in the bullpen. And Seattle has been without a pitcher, Matt Brash, all season, and closer Andres Munoz has pitched through injury. So the Mariners trading for a Rosarena and then going out and getting a reliever, it looks like they're really trying to contend with the Astros and whatever American League teams that they're going to have to deal with when it comes to the postseason. So I really like this move, and I think Yimi Garcia, I think his fantasy value went up just a little bit, just because the Mariners are playing a lot better than the Blue Jays are.
Yeah, I would have liked to see the Mariners done more with their lineup. I think the pitching, we know is not a question mark by any means. I think the Mariners, even with adding a Rosarena, had an opportunity to get a guy like Brent Rooker. I mean, he would have been a slam dunk in that lineup without giving up a ton, I don't think. And unless the Athletics just had such a high price tag, but I can't imagine that's the case.
All right, and July 26th, same day, the Orioles acquire former Philly right-handed pitcher Zach Eflin and cash from the Rays for infielder Mac Horvath and right-handed pitcher Jackson Baumeister and outfielder Matthew Etzel. So Zach Eflin, he's had a weird career, man. Last year was like a career year for him. I went into this season thinking like, all right, Zach Eflin's going to have like another like really good season, and he's just kind of been like very like meh. He has a 4.09 ERA and 19 starts for Tampa Bay this season, and he's under contract through 2025. So the Orioles are actually going to have him for at least one more season.
Like $18 million a year or something like that.
That's not bad. That's not bad considering the going rate for good starting pitchers is more like $25 million a year. He finished 6th in the American League Cy Young voting last season. And the Orioles only had to give up a couple of prospects, the number 10 and number 17 prospects in their organization to get Zach Eflin. So I feel like they just want to kind of like milk the last amount of baseball out of Zach Eflin that they can, especially with all the injuries that the Orioles have had with Kyle Bradish, John Means, and Tyler Wells out for the season. So Orioles definitely needed to make some moves, and they have been, man. I think the Mariners and the Orioles are kind of like in the lead for winning the trade deadline as of July 26th. Any thoughts on that?
I think the Orioles, yeah, I think I would throw the Phillies in there too, just for, I mean, just as far as what teams did to hit specific needs. I mean, the Dodgers, I would say probably 1-2 with Jack Flaherty. But
we're not there yet, bro.
Just, I guess, if you want to call the Orioles winners for what they did, and I don't think any team really did enough. I think every team probably could have done more.
Well, I just mean by this point, July 26th, it seems like they
Gotcha.
they were the winners so far, because we still have some more trades to go through. All right, so July 26th, the Mets acquire Ryan Stanek from the Mariners for outfielder Rylan Thomas. I guess the Mets needed another bullpen arm, and the Mariners were just kind of like sick of Stanek, which is weird because he's been like pretty decent his whole career. He did have a 4.38 ERA this season with 44 strikeouts in 46 appearances. So strikeouts were down a little bit. He took over the closer role in Seattle earlier this season when Andres Munoz was sidelined with a back issue. Had 7 saves, but you know, he's just kind of like that guy that's like, well, we'll just put him in there for now. And now that the Mariners ended up getting, you know, some pitching, so I don't think they really needed Ryan Stanek. I don't really think this really has much value because, you know, seeing how Stanek's had much of a decline this season, even though he was thrusted into Seattle's closer role, I don't think that the Mets are going to have any inclination to put him, you know, towards the back end of the or towards the front end of the bullpen. You know, who's the closer for the Mets?
Edwin Diaz.
I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names sometimes, but yeah, he kind of like has that closer role locked up, and he's been really good. In the beginning of the season, he kind of like sucked a little bit, but he's been turning it around ever since that IL stint, and he came back, and he's been not what he was 2 seasons ago, but he's been a lot better than he has. All right, So on July 27th, the Cubs acquire Nate Pearson from the Blue Jays for infielder Josh Rivera and outfielder Yohendrick Pinango. Nate Pearson, he had some fantasy value, some intrigue.
He was a big top prospect years ago.
He was a big prospect, and I was waiting for him to come up. I stashed him in a couple leagues, and he just kind of like never really like took that leap into what he could have been. So I don't really see much fantasy value for Nate Pearson. Any thoughts on the Cubs?
No, not same boat. I think he's just a project. Let's see if we have anything. If not, we tried.
Yeah, and they didn't really give up much for him. Let's see. Yeah. Infielder Josh Rivera and outfielder Yohendrick Pinango. I've never even heard those names before. So I think it's safe to say that they didn't really give up much for Nate Pearson. Same day, July 27th. Now, this is probably the biggest position player trade this season. Yankees acquire infielder, outfielder Jazz Chisholm Jr. from the Marlins for second base shortstop Jared Cerna and catcher Augustin Ramirez and shortstop Abraham Ramirez. So Jazz Chisholm has been on freaking fire since joining the Yankees this season. And dude, he is not shy about it either. I don't know if you saw like his big bat flip that he did when he hit the 3-run bomb the other day.
Shut up.
Were you watching the game?
I was at the game.
Oh, were you at that game? Damn, that was against Matt Strom, right?
He had 2 homers, and I mean, dude, I think every fear that everyone had about Jazz Chisholm, oh, he's a bad fit and everything else, I mean, he's kind of perfect right now for the villain role in the Yankees, and I think he's kind of a breath of not fresh air, but he fits in with the swag that some of the other, Soto brings and everything else, where they got an interesting vibe, and he kind of fit right in. And you want to hate Jazz Chisholm, but he's also everything that we've been saying, is that baseball is not just an old stiff sport anymore. He's making it fun. And I was booing Jazz Chisholm, but he was also running around my bases twice, and it was not a good feeling when he was crushing our souls with 2 homers in one game. So
yeah, when this guy's healthy, I feel like Jazz Chisholm could be like, a top 25 to top 30 position player in fantasy. He did have 6 hits against the Phillies, 8 RBI, and 2 home runs. 2 home runs on the 29th and 2 home runs on the 30th. So back-to-back days with 2 home runs. And looked really good, man. He's as long as he stays healthy, I think we can consider Jazz Chisholm like a pretty good fantasy contributor. And that's been the problem. That's been his MO since he came up to the big leagues. It's like
he's pretty streaky.
He is streaky, but he shows up in big moments, and we just need to keep him on the field, And I feel like the Yankees kind of just like they're always going after these injury-prone players. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or what's going on, but they're always going after guys like, Giancarlo Stanton, who had a bunch of injury history in the past. He did have that MVP season with the Marlins a few years ago. And in Jazz Chisholm, that has had multiple injury stints, in the last few seasons, ever since he's been called up. Also, he was a big name. Everyone thought that Jazz Chisholm was going to be like the it guy for the Marlins, and now the Yankees got him. So I think it's a good fit. I think the Jazz fits actually very well in the Yankees lineup. And they needed him, man, because the bottom half of the lineup has just been like dog doo-doo for the whole season, basically. Like Aaron Judge can't carry the team on his own. Aaron Judge and Soto. Giancarlo Stanton was actually looking really good in the first half until he got injured, and so they filled a need.
It's almost Jason Dominguez time. Get ready.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. With this Jazz Chisholm trade,
ready.
I think he's probably going to get pushed back a little bit. He'll probably be like a September call-up, but I don't think he's going to be coming up anytime soon.
Ticking. 1 to 2 weeks.
You think so? That quick?
Yes.
I that remains to be seen. All right, so same day, July 27th, the Brewers acquire right-handed pitcher Nick Mears from the Rockies for right-handed pitcher Bradley Blalock and right-handed pitcher Eugenio Herrera. So no fantasy value there in my eyes. Now this one was pretty crazy. There's a pretty crazy story about this one. July 27th, the Red Sox acquire catcher Danny Jansen from the Blue Jays for shortstop Edinson Paulino, third baseman Cutter Coffey, and right-handed pitcher Gilberto Batista. Now, the Red Sox, they have Connor Wong, and Connor Wong's been a very good catcher for them this season, but they did want some depth. They ended up getting Danny Jansen from the Red Sox, from the Blue Jays, and it was crazy because this was during their series with the Blue Jays. So the trade that happened actually happened like the night after Danny Jansen was in the Toronto lineup, and there was a rain delay, so the game actually got postponed. And he caught, I think it was 1 inning for the Blue Jays, and then they suspended the game. Then he gets traded to the Red Sox, and he's in the Red Sox uniform the next day when they make up this game, and they continue this game, and he's playing catcher for the Red Sox. I believe that was the first time in history that there was a catcher that played for 2 different teams in the same game because of that trade acquisition. Pretty crazy, man.
It's pretty dope.
Danny Jansen was supposed to be like another top catcher in the league, and he just kind of like hasn't really been much either. But if anything, I think the winner in this trade is the Blue Jays' Alejandro Kirk, because now there's no one else blocking him at the catcher position, because they had Dalton Varsho, who plays everyday left field now, but at the time, it was Dalton Varsho, Danny Jansen, and Alejandro Kirk, and they had to find time for catcher and DH for all three of these guys. So it did help out that Dalton Varsho was playing a lot of outfield, but there was still a logjam at the catcher position. And now Alejandro Kirk, I think he has the position all to himself. And if he can kind of like find his form again that he had a couple seasons ago, Alejandro Kirk could be another fantasy asset, at least a top 12 catcher. He has some big pop. He's like a big beefy type of baseball dude. I
was gonna say, I don't know who my baseball comp would be, who I would look like, but if you had a baseball comp, I would say you would look like Alejandro Kirk, and then you had to throw out the word beefy. I was thinking that whole time, you're like that beefy man.
Tony that has been on the show a couple times, Tony Snap, and he's also in our keeper league. He has made some references that I look like Jake Berger, especially when I had just the mustache. So I've seen some pictures of Jake Berger, and I kind of like put them face to face, like with mine, and I was like, oh shit, I kind of do look like Jake Berger. But hey, dude's making millions, so I'll take that. If someone thinks I'm Jake Berger as I'm walking down the street, yeah, I'll give you an autograph, no problem.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I've gotten a few times like people will tell me like, hey, you look like so and so. I've gotten Russell Crowe, I've gotten Randy Orton, I've gotten the a singer from a band, a metal band. I forgot what they were called, but I don't know. Maybe I just have one of those faces. Maybe it's the beard. The beard kind of gets them, and like I got the deep set eyes, and I'm part Japanese, so I got like the little like eyes that kind of like.
What?
I am part Japanese on my mom's side. My grandfather is actually born and raised in Okinawa, Japan.
Interesting.
Yeah, little side story about myself. All right, so moving on to July 27th, the Phillies acquire right-handed pitcher Carlos Estevez from the Angels for left-handed pitcher Samuel Aldeguerri and right-handed pitcher George Klassen. So honestly, I love this trade for the Phillies. This was the biggest trade in my eyes for the Phillies this season. They needed bullpen help. How many times have I talked to Phillies fans saying like, oh, we need to get more like better arms in the bullpen, like Sir Anthony Dominguez was supposed to be the closer of the future, and that was years ago, and he just never really like became that. And then now you go out and get Carlos Estevez, that was regarded as one of the top closers in baseball, just on a really crappy team. And now he's on the best team in baseball. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah. We're going to cut that clip out. No, I mean, I think it was an underrated move. I think the Phillies, once Sir Anthony was included in that trade, I knew the Phillies had to do something, and you could see the writing on the wall. They addressed the bat, and it was just a matter of them addressing the bullpen. I'll be honest, I think every fan wanted Mason Miller and was hoping it was Mason Miller, but kind of thought that there was a good chance they were going to, I don't want to say settle, but accept an Estevez or Tanner Scott just for the prospect capital it would cost to get a Mason Miller. And ultimately, Estevez, George Klassen's a good prospect, but the Phillies were able to keep their top prospects. And, they basically made it clear they didn't want to trade Andrew Painter, who has a huge, bright future, and Aiden Miller. And I totally agree. I wouldn't have done anything with those two either for anybody in baseball, honestly. And that's
Carlos Estevez has a 2.38 ERA and 20 saves for the Angels this season. Mm-hmm. So taking that into Philly, on a team that has like double the amount of wins that the Angels do, he's going to have a lot of save opportunities. And I know he's probably going to be battling it out against Hoffman for the closer role.
I think he will.
You don't think so?
He's going to get the majority of the opportunities. I think they're going to say, you're our guy now until you prove you're not. I mean, I think Hoffman is a great setup man. I think between him, I think Strom having the ability, and Alvarado. So they don't have a guy. And I think that's why you make a move like this, is to get a guy, and the rest are better at being strategically placed into the 7th, 8th, or 9th without having roles. But I think Estevez is their guy.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it. He was lights out with the Angels, and I haven't really seen much from him yet after this deadline trade. I'm sure you've seen a lot more than I have, but
Saw him in person. He was nice.
anytime you can get like a top arm like this, and you don't really give up much for him, that's a win right there, man.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, George Plassen could have a nice career. He's 3-2 with a 1.97 ERA and 15 appearances this year, so he could have a nice career. But it's a move you have to make to win now, and I think they also were looking at their future. That's why you hold on a guy like Painter and Miller, and you can say I can part with a guy like Klassen because you're not going to hit on every prospect either, and you also can't pay everyone if you do. So
right. And I believe Carlos Estevez is pretty cheap. So Phillies don't have to spend too much money on the 31-year-old closer. All right, so July 27th, we're continuing that day. Mets acquire outfielder Jesse Winker from the Nationals for right-handed pitcher Tyler Stewart. Now, Jesse Winker, he's having like a bounce-back season after only having a 567 OPS in 61 games with the Brewers last year. And he had a 793 OPS with 11 home runs and 101 games for the Nationals this season. So close to an 800 OPS with some decent pop and some speed on the base pass. I think that's a pretty decent deal that the Mets got in there. But I'm wondering, what do they do when Starling Marte comes back from his injury stint? And, they're going to have a logjam in the outfield also. I mean, Jesse Winker, the way that he's been playing this season, he's not the type of bat that you take out of the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, it's Jesse Winker. I mean, he's Jesse Winker. I mean, I'm not gonna sit there and hold my playoff hopes and just pray that Jesse Winker is going to be this guy all for the remainder of the season either. And I'm also not going to hold out hope Starling Marte is either. These guys are past their primes, and anything you can get from guys like this right now is a plus. So, I think they might platoon those two. So rather than just, again, saying you are our starter, I think they may just go, what are his stats against lefties and righties and situation specific. So I can see it that way.
Yeah, I think the fantasy value for Jesse Winker automatically goes up just hitting in a better lineup. But when Starling Marte does come back and it presents that logjam in the outfield, it'll be interesting to see what the Mets do, with Jesse Winker. Is he still going to be an everyday player? Or like you said, is he going to platoon with another outfielder? And if he does that, I think that Jesse Winker will basically be unrosterable in fantasy. Like, you can't hold on to a guy that's only playing 3 or 4 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
All right, July 28th, the Padres acquire right-handed pitcher Jason Adam from the Rays for 3 prospects. So Jason Adam has a 2.30 ERA and 24 saves and 194 strikeouts in 164 innings over 3 seasons with Tampa Bay. So great pitcher that the Padres have acquired. The Padres are that team that at the deadline they always seem to make a splash, and like what was it, Darvish? They traded for Darvish a few seasons ago after he ended his career with the Dodgers. I think he signed back with Texas, and then Juan Soto's another big one. So they always make a splash, and it just never really works out for them in the end. And I always hear like these Padres fans chirping, about like, oh, they're going to win the World Series this year. Like, come on, calm down, dude. Like, you haven't done anything that, is really like noteworthy. Like you had a good postseason run. What was it, 2 seasons ago? But, nothing came after that and get knocked out in the second round. And I haven't seen anything from the Padres this season to really be like, oh, they're definitely like a contender. I think they are actually like second place in the division. I'm actually going to check on that right now. They are second place. They are 59-51, 4.5 games back out from the Dodgers. But there's other teams that could be blocking the Padres when it comes to the wild card. The Braves and the Mets, they have similar win-loss records. So if the Padres can start to play the way that they did against the Dodgers, this past series, they ended up sweeping the Dodgers. I think that then, we can actually start considering them to be like actual threats in the postseason. But, it seems like every year, like they kind of just like tease us a little bit. Like Fernando Tatis is still hurt. They need him to come back. Machado has been very mid this season and last season. I thought Machado was going to break out again this year. After his offseason surgery, I think he was going to come back strong. That hasn't really happened. And Jurickson Profar has really been like the highlight of the Padres this season. He's the one that's been keeping them alive. And, one guy's not going to do it on his own, and they don't really have like the starting pitching that they've had in previous seasons. So, I don't know. We talked about Matt Waldron a few times on this show, and the best knuckleballer in baseball in the moment, but he's been on a slow decline lately. Maybe hitters are just kind of like figuring him out. But he has been throwing the knuckleball a lot less lately, also. So
why though?
I don't know, man. It's like if you're a knuckleballer and you're not throwing it at least 50% of the time, like what are you doing? That's your best pitch. Mm-hmm. Throw it more often. I don't know. Maybe he's just losing a little bit of confidence. Maybe it got hit hard a couple times, so he just kind of like shies away from it. I don't know. But good trade from the Padres. I still don't think that he has much fantasy value. He's probably going to get some holds, but I don't think he's going to be the closer in San Diego because they already have that locked up with Suarez. All right, so July 28th, the Cubs acquire Isaac Paredes from the Rays for third baseman Christopher Morel and 2 prospects. Now, this was a pretty crazy trade to me because I know Christopher Morel has been struggling at the plate this season, but if you look at his underlying numbers, his expected stats are way better than his actual stats, and maybe that's just the kind of player that he is. He hits the ball really hard, but he just gets out a lot. And he makes some pretty decent contact. He had 18 home runs before his trade. He makes that hard contact consistently. It's just a lot of times it's right to someone. So I think possibly the Rays are going to bring out something in Christopher Morel that the Cubs couldn't. And Isaac Paredes, I feel it was playing over his head a little bit in the Rays organization. Like he doesn't hit the ball very hard. I think his average exit velocity is like 87 point something miles per hour. But he was hitting a lot of home runs. So between last year and this year. So I don't know. Between those two, I think I have the upside bigger on Christopher Morel. So I think the Rays might have actually won this trade. And the Rays have been the team that trades for these guys that you don't think really have much value, and then they find the value in these players, like Randy Arozarena when they traded from the Cardinals. With the Cardinals organization, Arozarena had nothing going on, and then he goes over to the Rays and turns into an everyday player.
They're good at targeting players that they want, and they know how to, like you said, bring the best out in players and get what and then they'll flip them again at their peak.
Yeah, and I think Christopher Morel could possibly be another one. So if I have Christopher Morel in fantasy and I haven't dropped him yet, I think I'm holding on to him just because I think that the Rays are actually going to do something good with him. July 28th, Rangers acquire catcher Carson Kelly from the Tigers for 2 prospects. I don't really think that has much value there. July 29th, the Tigers acquire Ricky Vanasco from the Dodgers for cash. Not much fantasy value there. July 29th, the Royals acquire right-handed pitcher Mike Lorenzen from the Rangers for left-handed pitcher Walter Pennington. Mike Lorenzen has been around the league for a long time, and he's been on a lot of teams, dude. And I don't know if you know this, but when Lorenzen came up, he was actually a shortstop and a starting pitcher. When he got drafted, and in the Reds organization, when he got his initial call up, he was. This is when the National League didn't have the DH yet. He was actually a really good hitter in their lineup when he was starting for them. So he was
a little bit, yeah.
I wouldn't say like the original pitcher / hitter, because
Dontrell Willis.
Yeah, even Madison Bumgarner is like a really good hitting.
Bumgarner, yep.
Zach Greinke too. And then how can you forget Bartolo Colon's epic home run with the Mets?
God.
All right, so Mike Lorenzen, I think a little bit better fantasy value now that he's with the Royals, because the Royals are doing much better than the Rangers are this season. But it's more about depth. Lorenzen has a 3.81 ERA and 101 and 2/3 innings this season with the Rangers. He made 18 starts for Texas, and I think the Royals kind of like just needed something towards the end of the back of their rotation. They might even put him back in the bullpen, because Mike Lorenzen has bounced back and forth between the bullpen and the starting rotation for multiple teams in the past.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to talk about on Mike Lorenzen. He's been there. You know, he's a streamer. I think more than anything, you might add him if you really are desperate for pitching with injuries. But
yeah, against weaker lineups, especially, in that division, especially against the White Sox, the Royals see the White Sox a lot. I don't know how many more times they're going to face the White Sox, from now until the end of the season. Might not be anymore. We're a little bit past the halfway point. I don't know. We'll see.
with the limited time that we do have left, do you want to hit on the main trades, or do you want to hit on more the surprises more than anything?
I can kind of like scroll through and see if I see anything. All right. So Dodgers acquire infield outfielder Tommy Edman and Michael Kopech and right-handed pitcher Oliver Gonzalez. This is a 3-team trade. The Cardinals acquired Eric Fetty, Tommy Pham, and the White Sox acquired Miguel Vargas, Jarrell Perez, and Alexander Albertus. Miguel Vargas, I think, has the potential to actually have some higher fantasy value now, because on the White Sox, that just are a very struggling team, he's going to see everyday at bats, which he wasn't with the Dodgers, because they kept on moving it from left field to third base to second base, and he was just kind of like all over. But I think now with the trade of Eloy Jimenez, that Miguel Vargas is going to be their everyday left fielder. So even though the lineup context is a lot worse, I think just the everyday at-bats actually makes Miguel Vargas have some intriguing fantasy value. He can get on a hot streak. We've seen him get hot in the past, and playing every day in a lineup, that's going to help his value a little bit more. And he's multi-position eligible. So good on Miguel Vargas. Eric Fetty going to the Cardinals definitely increases his fantasy value. He came into the season after pitching in the KBO, I believe, for the past few seasons. And, he learned a new pitch, and he was looking good in the beginning of the season, still looks good. And I think the Cardinals definitely got a starting pitcher. I have Eric Fetty in 2 of my leagues, and he's had a couple clunkers, but I think the Cardinals, they're not that much of an upgrade from the White Sox in terms of, the team context, but it's definitely a little bit better than pitching for the White Sox.
Yeah, I think that was one of my headlines, honestly, from the trade deadline, is just how much in general the White Sox just really botched the deadline. And overall, the trade package that they got for Eric Fetty was pretty weak. Not getting one of the top prospects from the Cardinals. I mean, for Eric Fetty was really one of the top, if not the top pitcher that was dealt at the deadline. And to not walk out of there without Jordan Walker or, any of their top guys is tough. And, we'll talk on here about Crochet and also Luis Robert, and just not doing a thing with them. And I think that's tough. There was a huge demand for pitching, and I think they undervalued Fetty and just overvalued everybody else. It was really weird.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Garrett Crochet actually shot himself in the foot with his comments about he doesn't want to pitch in the postseason unless he gets an extension from whatever team trades for him. I think that kind of like that comment itself just
that's not good for baseball. If that continues.
Yeah, what team is going to trade for a guy that is only thinking about himself, and not thinking about the team context. You're playing for the team on the front, not the name on the back,
Mm-hmm.
So that's another Josh Hader type of comment. Last season when Josh Hader was saying that he's not a 2-inning guy, he's a closer, and that's it. And he told the Padres, like, don't treat me like that. I am the closer on this team. I'm not going to pitch multiple innings for you in one day. And I don't know. After years of being considered elite, you can start demanding stuff like that, and teams won't really care because they just want you on their team. Begura Crochet, he's been in the league for 3 seasons now, and yeah, he's having a decent year, like a 3.30 ERA. Last year was a lot better, but I don't know. And in your 3rd year in the majors, you can't really be demanding stuff like that. You wait until you're a free agent and then you tell them, like, this is what I want in my contract. You're not going to be demanding stuff like that from teams that are already like, well, we don't really need you. We wanted you because you could have potentially helped us, win the World Series. But, with that type of attitude, we already kind of know that you're going to be a cancer in the clubhouse. So we're going to go ahead and pass on you.
What else surprised you at the trade deadline? I guess, were you happy with the Flaherty trade as a Dodgers fan?
Yeah, I mean, the Dodgers are, kind of like what I was talking about before, where the Yankees are like, they go after injury prone players. It seems like the Dodgers are kind of like the same. They go after Tyler Glass now, who just came back off of injury, and now with Jack Flaherty, who's had a lot of back issues in the past. I feel like that is another one that, they're just going after injury prone players. So I think it's good, and it'll help towards the end of the season, especially with so many question marks about Walker Buehler and, how fast and effective is Yamamoto going to come back.
Well, let's talk about that. What's your pitching staff look like in October?
So I think getting all the injuries out of the way now is actually going to help the Dodgers. So that way, by the time all these guys are back,
injuries are unpredictable. They can happen again in October.
True, but coming into the postseason a little bit more fresh, after a few starts of, after loosening up, Tyler Glass now coming back now, he's already surpassed, I think, his innings totals from previous seasons. So having that IL stint for Tyler Glass now, I really hope there's not another one, but we got Glass now, Yamamoto, Kershaw, Bobby Miller got sent down to the minors. So I don't know if they're probably going to give him another shot soon, but I don't think that he's going to be sticking in the rotation. And Gavin Stone has been looking really good this season. And then now with Jack Flaherty, I think that Gavin Stone and Jack Flaherty are probably going to, or Gavin Stone and Kershaw are going to be kind of like more at the back end of the rotation, especially after Kershaw had that clunker yesterday against the Padres. And I think Yamamoto, Glass now, and Flaherty are probably going to be like the 1-2-3 punch that they're going to need in the postseason to kind of like get them through the teams that have been the Achilles heel in the past few seasons. Need to get through the division series before we see the Phillies in the championship series.
We'll see you there.
Yeah, hopefully, right? I would love to go to a Dodgers-Phillies game over here, in the postseason. I haven't gone to any games yet this season. I saved my money when the Dodgers came just like a few weeks ago. And if the Dodgers come in October, I'm definitely going to at least one game. I'll probably save my money and go to like the last game possible, like the elimination game,
The last game of the sweep. When the Phillies sweep the Dodgers, you're just going to wait for that?
I don't know. Regular season and postseason are completely different. We'll see, man. I think both teams are going to bring their A game. But we didn't have any of our starting pitching, going into that series. Like every single one of our starting pitchers were hurt. So going into the postseason, if we can stay healthy, I think that's going to be a different story, completely different story.
time's going to tell. It'll be fun to watch. That'd be a 6 series.
Really will. Justin Turner, one of my favorite players, getting traded to the Mariners from the Blue Jays. That I don't really think that changes his fantasy value too much. He's been having a down season, 254 with 6 home runs and a 720 OPS this season. I think that the Mariners said that he's going to be their primary DH with playing, first and third once in a while. So I don't know what kind of fantasy value Justin Turner really has now. I think he's fine, like when he gets the hot streak, but yeah, he's kind of just the guy that you wait for the hot streak to come and then you add him. He's not the guy you keep on your team all season.
What I would call it a bat streamer. If you need a bat for a day on like a Thursday or a Monday,
yeah,
or maybe hit me a home run.
Or if the Mariners are going to like a very favorable ballpark and they're away for an entire week and you need like a first baseman for that week only, and because I don't want to start Justin Turner if he's playing in Seattle. If they have a home stretch for a complete week, I don't think that that's the type of bat that you really want to go for. But if they're playing, I don't know, almost anywhere else, because the Mariners Stadium is actually the worst for right-handed bats.
Yeah.
Astros acquire Yusei Kikuchi from the Blue Jays. So this is actually a pretty interesting deal that the Astros did, because they knew that they needed to upgrade their pitching with question marks about Justin Verlander. They needed that extra starting pitcher. Yusei Kikuchi is not really like the sexy kind of trade, but I mean, they needed something, right? And I think that that's the one that maybe they weren't targeting, but it was the easiest one that they could get without giving up the world.
Yeah, I think that's well said. He's been in the league for a while. He's been there, done that. He fits in with their culture, and you're not giving up a whole lot either. So it's a safe move for a team that's on the cusp of, has an opportunity to go for it, and why not without giving up a whole lot.
Yeah, and the Astros are actually they can bring out something in starting pitchers also, and they know how to handle pitchers. They have a pretty good staff over there. So I think that Yusei Kikuchi is going to be more. His fantasy value definitely went up versus being the Blue Jays. Dodgers acquire Ahmed Rosario from the Rays. That's fine. I feel like that's just more depth. I don't think he really
better than Kevin Biggio.
Yeah, better than Kevin Biggio for sure. I think that Ahmed Rosario, he's more just kind of like that, like utility guy. I was thinking like maybe they were just gonna like DFA either Chris Taylor or Kike Hernandez, and just have Ahmed Rosario as like the utility guy, but nothing's happened yet. I don't know. We'll see. Dodgers are notorious for having a lot of injuries, so good to have depth. All right. Brewers acquire Frankie Montas from the Reds for Joey Wiemer. So Frankie Montas is going from a very hitter-friendly ballpark to a slightly worse hitter-friendly ballpark, but it's still a really good hitter's ballpark. So I don't think Frankie Montas's fantasy value is really going up too much from there.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Braves acquire Jorge Soler from the Giants for Tyler Matzek and infielder Sabin Caballos. I think Jorge Soler's fantasy value just went up a bit. They're trying to avoid the Giants ballpark. It's really crappy for hitters. There's triples alley. A lot of hitters can get triples if you have some speed on the base paths. The center field, it's shaped so weird that they call it triples alley because the ball kind of gets like lost over there, and it's easy. It's a lot harder for outfielders to get the ball in quicker when it's hit to that section. But Jorge Soler, he's fine. If you need power, he is definitely a big power hitter. So in categories leagues, I think he's good. In points leagues, he's okay. I've never actually personally owned Jorge Soler in any of my leagues, so that kind of like shows you the priority that I have him on my list. All right,
I'm in the same boat.
Yankees acquire Mark Leiter Jr. from the Cubs. I think that's good for the future, but not really much fantasy value in 2024. Let's see. Orioles acquire Trevor Rogers from the Marlins for Connor Norby and Kyle Stower. So this one's a little bit intriguing because Trevor Rogers was in Cy Young voting a few seasons ago, and ever since his shoulder injury, he just hasn't been the same. But maybe the Orioles can find something in Trevor Rogers that he hasn't been able to find himself in the last couple seasons. So
yeah, maybe.
Diamondbacks acquire Josh Bell from the Marlins. That's some pretty significant fantasy value increase for Josh Bell. The Diamondbacks just lost Christian Walker to injury, and he's going to be out at least 3 weeks. So at least for the next 3 weeks, Josh Bell, it definitely increases his value a little bit. I'm thinking more like 12 team leagues that have a corner infield spot. He's a decent option in the corner infield. Anything shallower than that, I don't think he really has much value. And let's see. Royals acquire Paul DeJong from the White Sox. I don't really see much fantasy value there either because the Royals already have like a pretty stacked infield. So I don't know where he would really play. He's probably depth. And Mets acquire Paul Blackburn from the A's. Blackburn's been having somewhat of a decent season. He has a 4.41 ERA and 9 starts for the A's. Maybe the Mets can bring something out of him, but he's still just a streamer for me. And let's see. Is that it? Pirates acquire Brian De La Cruz from the Marlins. That's kind of like a lateral move.
I thought a couple. Martin Perez is now a Pirate. Isaiah kind of for Lefa.
Probably
Pirates. I know we talked briefly about the Jackson Holiday.
Here's another one that surprised me a lot. Dodgers acquire center fielder Kevin Kiermaier from the Blue Jays for left-handed pitcher Ryan Yarbrough. So
give him a shot to get a championship before he fades out in the sunset.
Yeah, and he's a really good defensive center fielder. The bat hasn't really been there the last few seasons, but Kevin Kiermaier was on the team with Kevin Pillar. Both of those guys, just the defense that you could see on a daily basis in the outfield from Kiermaier and Pillar was just otherworldly, and Dodgers fans kind of missed that from Bellinger. Bellinger was a Gold Glove center fielder, and Outman's fine. Andy Pajas is a terrible defender, so having Kiermaier in that definitely is going to help save some runs, which I think is what they're thinking about, having Kiermaier out there. See. Okay, here it is. Padres acquire Martin Perez from the Pirates. Martin Perez had a good run with the Rangers a few seasons ago, but ever since then, he's just been on a decline. I still see him as a streamer also. Padres acquire Tanner Scott. So Padres going after another bullpen arm. Tanner Scott was the closer for the Marlins and now moving into the Padres organization. He's definitely not going to be the closer. So he lost a little bit of fantasy value there. Dodgers acquiring Jack Flaherty. We talked about that. And that's it. That was all the trades that went down from July 1st until July 30th, the deadline. So we did go for a little bit. We're at an hour and 8 minutes into the show. Anything else you want to bring up about the trades? I wanted to go over like winners and losers, but I mean, I know you don't really have a lot of time because you got to start heading over to Truist Park pretty soon.
We are about to boogie, but I will say it's weird the White Sox saying that they're just going to trade Luis Robert and let him build up his stock in the offseason. Is his offseason stock going to be much higher than it is now? I mean, I think teams are going to be able to sign free agents and make other trades. I mean, he had a good demand right now, and I think they're just a big mistake and a big flop all around by the White Sox.
Yeah, I think their asking price was just a little bit too much for Robert and for Crochet. So they definitely dropped the ball on that one. They did sell some pieces, but it was not enough. I think they could have done a lot more and set themselves up for years to come, and they just didn't pull the trigger, unfortunately.
Well, I'm going to go watch the Braves lose.
Yeah, so you hope, right? All right. Well, thank everyone for watching today's show. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and scan that QR code in the top right corner to follow all of our social medias. And I will not be here next week. I will be on a beach in Mexico, but John will be here, and we're going to have Ernie Orange hosting the show. He is from our other show that we have on Sunday nights, Real Talk Baseball Power Hour with Carlos and Ernie. So, yeah, make sure you guys tune in next week and catch Ernie and John talking fantasy. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.
See you guys.